Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Press Rewind Prince Lyrics podcast. I'm your host, Jason Brenninger. In this episode, we'll be talking about Party Up, the last track on Prince's Dirty Mind album. To talk with me about Party Up, I've invited author and blogger Laura Tiebert to join me. Laura is also going through a unique journey that she is documenting on her blog at lauratiebert.com. She calls it Crazy Amazing, the Year of Living Like Prince. So I am honored to have Laura join me today to talk about Party Up. Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome Laura Tiebert to the Prince Lyrics podcast, Press Rewind. Hi, Laura.
Hey, Jason. Great to be here.
Thanks. I appreciate you joining me today. We're going to be talking about Party Up, which is the 8th track, the final track on Dirty Mind, Prince's third album. And this is kind of a funky protest song with an interesting origin story. But before we get started, since you're new to our podcast and it's the first time that you've been my guest, I would appreciate it if you could give the listeners a little backstory about who you are and what you're up to and where maybe people can find you.
Yeah, sure. I am a writer and an author. I am the co-author, along with Alex Hahn, of a 2017 biography of Prince called The Rise of Prince, 1958 to 1988. And in addition to that, I maintain a blog at lauratiebert.com, in which for this year, 2019, I am living like Prince for an entire year. And I am test driving 12 things that I saw Prince do in my research, as we research the rise of Prince. And I am becoming a purple guinea pig by trying those 12 things out on myself to see if I also could be more successful. And in the process, hopefully benefit a lot of people who might be inspired to up their game as well.
Yeah, it's very inspiring, and I encourage anybody not only to check out the book, because the book is a wonderful resource for interviews and things of that nature leading up to Prince's big break, and his backstory, his early childhood, and people that he met and passed, his life passed through a lot of individuals before he became a superstar. So getting that information in a written form and those interviews documented is invaluable, and I appreciate the work that you did with that book, and I encourage anybody to read that. And also the blog is super interesting. I've also seen you on Prince's Friend with your interview, and that was hearing you talk about it is almost just as inspiring as anything else, because you seem very passionate about it, and it just makes you think to yourself, well, you know what, I can do interesting things too, and I can live a little bit outside of my comfort zone. It's okay. Like me doing this podcast is living a little bit out of my comfort zone, and that is okay. Forcing us to do things. I encourage everybody to check it out. So thanks, Laura, for being on.
Oh yeah, thanks. Yeah, living in your uncomfort zone. That's what that's what this year is about for me. But yeah,
Yep.
I'd love it if people would check it out. And you're lucky, Jason, because this month my theme is no, because Prince would just say no to things he didn't want to do. I mean, no. Do you want to
Yes.
be in the "We Are the World" song? No.
No.
So you're lucky you asked me before to.
Yes, I asked you to join me back in May when it wasn't the no month. So
That worked out
I was
well.
fortunate there. My timing was right on. I'll wait until next month to ask you if you want to rejoin me.
That's right. Unless you have a real thick skin,
Yeah,
then
there you
feel
go.
free. I dare you.
You gotta be able to understand and accept a no answer sometimes.
That's right.
All right. So as I mentioned in the intro, Party Up has a bit of an interesting origin story, and you researched this a bit for the book, and you have probably some insight that maybe some of the listeners might not know about this song. If you wouldn't mind briefly sharing that with us.
Sure. Well, I mean, the genesis for this song was a groove by Morris Day, which Prince heard as Morris was, playing sort of in the studio here in Minneapolis and just kind of playing around with it. It was actually started as a drum and bass groove. Morris Day was an incredible drummer. Who really wasn't comfortable being a front man until Prince pushed him out front.
Which
But
is crazy to understand that now because he is like the consummate front man now, but it's interesting to read that. When I read that in the book, I was like, wow, I just didn't. I always figured he had like this personality that just exuded confidence and just was like front man personified. But yeah, interesting.
isn't that crazy? I mean, it really is, perfect lesson in sort of stepping up and getting on stage and being comfortable in the spotlight. So, yeah. So Morris was in Minneapolis in 1980. I think he had gone to LA for a little while, but he had returned, and Prince had invited him, to, if you want to, kind of come and join me in the studio once in a while. So they were kind of playing around with this, and Prince liked the groove, and so he offered Morris a choice, and it was clearly one of these forks in the road
Hmm.
for Morris, where it was like, do you want $10,000? I'll pay you $10,000 for this groove, or do you want me to create an act around you? And, we all know the choice Morris made, which resulted in the creation of The Time. So,
Yeah,
yeah, so it seems like Morris definitely made the right choice.
I would
Um,
assume so.
Not
Yeah.
going for the immediate gratification, but having the longer view on things. And really, it happened quite quickly because the time was formed in early 1981. So Prince stayed true to his word, and yeah, and the time
Yeah.
was born.
Yeah, and the Times debut album was released that same year. So, but we also know that Prince was just a writing and recording machine his
Yes.
entire life, but especially in the early 80s. So the fact like, okay, yeah, here's this band. Now we're going to release an album. We're going to create an album's worth of material, record it, and get it out this year. It's not,
Yeah.
it's something that, just doesn't really happen these days. But not only was Prince doing that at the time for other acts, but he is also releasing an album a year of his own material. He obviously could multitask, and he had that ability to just record, write, and the Time benefited from that by getting an album out right away. So yeah, it didn't languish in development hell for multiple years like some proteges do, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I think being a Prince fan, in real time back then was probably like trying to drink from a fire hose. Um, so,
Right.
but yeah, it really, the whole thing, everything was moving very quickly in 1980. I mean, when Dirty Mind was born, really, in early 1980, Prince went out with Rick James, and he opened for Rick James from February to May on tour, and then he returned home and in May and began recording Dirty Mind in a small, modest cottage on Lake Minnetonka in what is now a very upscale community called Orono. At the time, I'm sure it was much more rural and quiet. But
Yeah.
I actually spoke to someone in the community here whose parents lived a couple houses down from the house where Prince recorded Dirty Mind. And I guess he was quite a sight in that rural community.
Well, I'm sure he was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Different look now, but back then it would have been maybe a little jarring to see somebody
Yes.
dressed like Prince and, with I don't know what kind of an entourage he had back then, but nevertheless, he probably stuck out like a sore thumb, if I had to guess.
Exactly. Exactly. I'm sure some eyebrows were raised, but that's all.
Yeah.
That was all good. I mean, Prince liked being in a peaceful environment, and to create, and that's what he got in Orno.
Yes, yes, he was never one to really surround himself with a lot of the typical rock and roll tropes to get himself through a recording process. He preferred the solitude for sure.
Yes.
All right, so the groove was Morris's. Prince got it from him in exchange for starting a band, as you already mentioned. But the lyrics are Prince's, if I understand correctly. Like the groove was Morris's, but the concept behind like the lyrics and the song itself was developed by Prince. Is that your understanding as well, Laura?
Yes. I mean
Okay.
that's the writing credit is all Prince.
Yeah.
So, and I don't think there's any question about that. Yeah. It's a
So
Prince tune.
right, exactly. Nobody's taking credit for the lyrics.
No.
Um, the lyrics, so like I mentioned, this is kind of like a funky protest song, and the seems like the lyrics were written as a response to then President Carter's reinstatement, not so much of the draft, but they to have all young men register with selective service,
Yes.
which I guess what it meant, what that was meant to do was to provide the government with a list of young men that could be called upon if there was a crisis or major conflict. So it was probably perceived a bit like registering for the draft, like hey, we could get called up to fight in a war because now we're registered on this list with the selective service. That was sometime in 1980, so it was still President Carter at the time. Reagan had not been elected, and I think it seems like the lyrics of the song were kind of written in response to that. Was that something you would agree with?
Yes. I did extensive research on this issue by turning to my husband last night and saying, "Hey, do you remember having to register?"
Hmm.
Because my husband was born the same month as Prince. So, talk about real time. And he did remember that they had a mandatory registration. But here's the thing, anyone Prince's age would have been too old by 2 or 3 years when this came up. So it was probably not something Prince had to do. In a way, his age group was really fortunate. They were
Yeah.
too young for Vietnam, and then too old by the draft. I believe ended in 1973. So, but by the time this sort of registration was mandatory again, they were a little bit too old for it. I guess they were 22 or 23. So he's fortunate in that way. And I thought a little bit about that, especially in The Rise of Prince when we were writing about Prince being on the Rick James tour because, and again, remember this was directly feeding into the writing of Dirty Mind. Rick James was 10 years older than Prince.
Yep.
So by accident of birth, he was actually in a very unfortunate situation where he was just about the perfect age for the Vietnam draft. And in fact, Rick James was a draft dodger.
Yeah. I read that. I remember reading
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, he ran across the border from his hometown of Buffalo and into Toronto, where these are just incredible Rick James stories that are detailed in his autobiography, Glow. That, three drunk white guys tried to beat him up for going AWOL. And then he was helped by three other white guys who happened to be professional musicians. And because of them, Rick James winds up meeting Joni Mitchell and Neil Young, and just
Wow.
and forming a band called the Mina Birds with Neil Young in it that gets signed to Motown. And just as they're ready to release their first single, the U.S. Armed Forces caught up with Rick James and threw him in the brig for going AWOL.
Wow, what a story,
But
right?
that's the kind of like Prince had been around Rick James, in 1980 more than would have been considered healthy for anyone.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, a lot of the stuff might have been fresh in his mind as he was, thinking of lyrics for the song, probably hearing stories, from Rick or from associates of Rick about his history and his background. And then this comes across, this registration law goes into effect, and it's all like this perfect storm of occurrences that happen in Prince's life to be like, okay, well, this is a song I want to write. I want to write a political song because Dirty Mind, he wanted to say things that he hadn't said before anyway. The whole album was filled with songs that he was writing to make a point or take a stand or, create some sort of buzz. And he had done the sex songs quite frequently on that album, but this is like the first political song, I guess you could call it. And so it's notable for that in my mind, for being that. And even though Dirty Mind is thought of as a risque album with a lot of explicit lyrics and sexual songs, Party Up is not one of them. But it's still political, and still makes a stand and tries to say something important.
I mean, this really is a significant song. I mean, it's a Prince classic because it is his first protest song. And I feel that Prince does not get the accolades he deserves for his body of work in that area. He was writing protest songs till the end. I mean, in 2015,
yes,
he wrote Baltimore, right? And
Yep.
and in fact, it's somewhat evocative of Party Up in that there's a chant, so whereas Party Up ends with a chant, Baltimore has a chant of "If there ain't no justice, then there ain't no peace," and it's very evocative. It's almost like bookends in a lot of ways. Yeah.
Very good point. Very good point. And the chanting obviously is a protest staple, so it makes sense in a protest songs to create a memorable phrase that one can chant over and over in order to reiterate a point. And Party Up, obviously that, they chant over and over, Party Up, got to Party Up, but at the very end, he chants with the live version, it's the band, but obviously when he's recording it, it's just Prince. You're going to have to fight your own damn war because we don't want to fight no more. He just chants that over and over and over until the end of the song, just to kind of hammer home the point that him and his friends and his generation are not interested in another Vietnam. They're not interested in taking part in another Vietnam where young men are being drafted into a war that they may or may not understand or believe in, and they don't want to fight. I mean, this is 1980. The war had only officially been over less than a decade, so it was obviously very fresh in everybody's mind. And I'm sure Prince knew people that fought in the Vietnam War that were drafted from his neighborhood and whatnot, and ended up fighting. So he's not having it.
No, absolutely. I mean, and back in I think January of 1980, the Soviet Afghan war was going on, and the U.S. was considering intervening. So this was a real this was very much a real issue, and it set off a wave of protests. So I think Prince was very much in line with what the young people of the day were feeling, and it has definitely a 60s feel to it, a 60s. Prince was a child of the 60s,
Mm-hmm.
and he very much had that sort of counterculture view of war, and this sort of how are you going to make me kill somebody I don't even know, right? It's this sort of innocent, youthful message, but it gets to the heart of it, right? I mean, that's the heart of it. So
Right.
yeah, what I love about Party Up is it also has this hedonistic aspect to it, which you see throughout the next couple albums. I mean, Prince's response in 1999, to nuclear holocaust is to party, and so I think you see that here, right? This is sort of the genesis that then leads to 1999. That the only reasonable response to war is, hey, let's party.
Yeah, I mean, if you just look at the title, Party Up, you don't automatically think, oh, this is probably a protest song.
No.
It doesn't really necessarily make that very clear. You have to listen to the song, listen to the lyrics to even have a clue what you're getting at, because if you just listen to the Party Up, got to Party Up, you're not going to get anything from that. I mean, that's a fun chant and it makes it a good song, but it's the verses And of course, at the very end, if you didn't catch it, like if you missed it somehow by listening to the verses talking about, we don't give a damn, we just want to jam, party up. That army bag, such a double drag, party up. He talks about revolutionary rock and roll, going uptown, baby. And he also says in the verse, how are you going to make me kill somebody I don't even know?
Yeah.
But because of the way, and I've mentioned this multiple times in previous podcasts, the way that Prince sings a lot of his earlier material, it doesn't always make it easy for the listener to exactly hear word by word what he's saying. And so if you're just listening to it and you're not paying attention because of the way it's being sung, some of these words can just go right over your head and you're really not catching the meaning behind the track. And if all you hear is the chorus, party up, got to party up, you just think this is a party song, and
Right.
you're really not getting it. But one of my favorite section, personal favorite section of the song is when they say, because of their half-baked mistakes, we get ice cream, no cake, all eyes, no truth. Is it fair to kill the youth? I love that because it's just so kind of off the wall with the comparisons to half-baked mistakes, and then they talk about ice cream, no cake. So it's like a half-baked mistakes, and then moving on to like a dessert that you have to bake. And it's not like it's a half-baked cake. It's no cake. You don't get any cake.
Yeah, there's no substance, right? It's
Yeah.
just the thing on top. But yeah, it's notable for one of the rare Prince baking references in his lyrics.
Yeah.
Ice cream maybe would have come up again, but yeah, cake, no. So we get pasta simmering on the stove in June, much later in his career. But yeah, this is a rare baking reference in a protest song.
Yeah.
But
And
it's got that Prince sort of whimsicality to it.
Oh, for sure.
That kind of sly humor that is such a hallmark of Prince lyrics, to throw in cake and ice cream. But yeah, it's you're right. On the surface, it sounds like a really cool sort of rock funk jam song, but it's actually much deeper when you delve in, and if you really listen. I mean, it's sort of it sort of leads Prince into, because it's the album closer as well, it very much leads right into what we'll see him do in Controversy, where he's starting to sort of fancy himself somewhat of a political commentator. I mean, maybe not to great effect, but it's interesting to see this development. And he goes on throughout his career, I mean, to do quite a lot of protest songs. I mean, from Cinnamon Girl and Musicology to Act of God in 2010, and my favorite, Colonized Mind, which is a bluesy track. So it's so yeah, I mean, this sets him off on a trajectory, and really all of Dirty Mind is, this whole album is highly significant because it's really the first album in, what Alex Hahn and I wrote about in the book, is that it's probably the most significant or greatest really run of creativity in pop history, and it starts here with Dirty Mind. So this is Prince coming out of the gate now, with a real viewpoint.
Yeah, and saying something that people can relate to and get behind, at least with the crowd and those individuals that he was speaking to, like the ones that were going to buy a Prince record, the ones that were going to listen to a Prince record. This is the kind of stuff that they were probably wanting to hear from members of his generation, and to kind of speak for them. So like the distrust of government, all lies, no truth. Is it fair to kill you? So that, speaks to a little bit of distrust of the government, of officials in charge. You got to put some subversiveness in there, with lines like, "Fighting war is such a fucking bore. Party up." It's like,
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
Okay, you're right. Yeah, who wants to fight war? I'd rather party. I'd rather, have sex. I'd rather hang out uptown. And he mentions uptown again in the song, so he says, "Going uptown, baby." So once again, that kind of to me reiterates the point that Uptown is more than just a Minneapolis neighborhood. It's also like a way of thinking. It's a place in your head and in your heart. And I think that that is clear here in the song as well when he says it's all about what's in your mind. Going uptown, baby. I don't want to die. I just want to have a bloody good time. And so for me, bringing up Uptown again in the context of those lines, what it's all about, what's in your mind, tells me again that Uptown is not just a place.
Right. Uptown is a utopia.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
it very much is a utopia in Prince's mind. And yeah, it's much, I mean, much as sort of Paisley Park became later,
Yeah,
right?
for
You
sure.
know, which he sings in Around the World in a Day. Paisley Park becomes this sort of utopia as well. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting how he references that now as a concept, you know, more than just a physical location. And yeah, I mean, it's also significant that Party Up was the song he performed on Saturday Night Live, his first performance on Saturday Night Live, which took place in February of 1981. And, you know, instead of choosing Dirty Mind, I think, wisely chooses Party Up. And, you know, it's got this sort of anarchic appeal to it, right?
Hmm.
And punk, you know, he was very much going for this sort of punk, new wave uh, aesthetic and sound at the time. So, and, you know, it was very much helping him cross over to that audience. And, you know, being in New York, Prince was hugely loved by the critics, right? All the critics love you in New York, which we hear on 1999. He was receiving rave reviews for Dirty Mind. So he was really finding a new audience there at
Yeah,
the time.
I love that Saturday Night Live performance. The band, Prince and the band look like they're a cool gang, you know, like
Yeah.
they're the
Yeah.
cool kids. They're the cool
Yeah.
kids. They're the cool punk kids. They're multiracial, multigender. They just look like they are the group that is saying something important, but they're also like their own insular gang. And when they
Yeah.
all just run off the stage, you know, at the end, Prince knocks down his microphone and runs off the stage, and they all kind of follow suit. They probably like, oh wait, I guess we better follow him.
Yeah.
But they'll run off
Right.
like it's like the like a stick and move type of approach. Like we're gonna sing this song, we're going to say something maybe a little controversial to people, and hopefully people get it, and then we're going to get the hell out of here because we have to move on to the next. We have to move on
Yeah.
to the next thing. We got to go get out of here because we're dangerous and we don't want to get arrested, you know. So
Yeah, yeah. They just storm off stage. You know,
yeah,
they really do. He knocks down that mic and they're out of there. And so yeah, Prince not only knew how to make an entrance, he knew how to make an exit too. So so yeah,
yeah,
it's a great performance. And you know, I was surprised actually to see. I looked in the history. He doesn't perform again on Saturday Night Live till maybe '89. So you know, this was very memorable for quite some time, I think. And
yeah,
yeah, so yeah, I think he made an impression. And really, that was in the early days of SNL. I think it was its sixth season only. So it was hosted by Charlene Tilden, who was a
yeah.
star
From
of
Dallas,
Dallas.
yes,
Who,
Dallas.
yeah, which also provides an interesting contrast with the musical cast.
Not much more mainstream than Dallas in 1980.
That's true. I think Prince shook some people up, you know, with that performance. But yeah, so it's you know, as I did a little more research on Party Up, I admittedly went down a few research rabbit holes. And because one thing that occurred to me, I don't know if this occurred to you as well, about the term party up. I mean, back in the day, like the term was actually party down.
Right.
You know, it was like, hey, you want to party down? Or, you know, I think people would sometimes say it kind of jokingly. But there was actually a song in 1974 called Party Down. It was sort of an R&B hit. And I saw a clip of it actually being played on Soul Train back then. So it's interesting, you know, that Prince plays with that idea of, you know, partying down versus party up. And, you know, it's just princely.
Right. Why do something that's already been done?
Yeah,
It's the same concept, but party down is boring. Let's
yeah,
let's make a new phrase. Let's say something that nobody's heard before, and that was obviously something that he relished in doing and did very well. And here's yet another example, and an early example of just like because nobody it didn't catch on. I mean, nobody says party up
no,
these days, but it doesn't matter because it's documented now, and it's documented as a song that Prince created off of an album that really kind of was his, like you said, the beginning of his run of greatness in the 80s. And Party Up has always been one of my favorite songs off of the album because it is different. It sounds different. It has a different style to it. It seems frenetic, like it just keeps propelling forward, and then he has to like rein it in a little bit with the choruses. But then the guitar line and just the way the whole song progresses forward, it ends too quickly for me. I could listen to a much longer version of this song and be perfectly happy. But its briefness also is effective and well as well, just like the entire album.
right. Well, when you need to storm off stage at the end, I guess you have to keep it somewhat brief.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yes.
it's. I mean, I looked to at Prince's catalog, and I think the only other song with party in the that uses party in the title is Party Man, which there was actually a mix of Party Man that sampled Party Up. Now maybe you'll think of more that
Hmm.
include party, but
Not
yeah,
off the top of my head.
okay, yeah, yeah. So it's I like how Prince plays with words and turns things on its head. I mean, party up is sort of uplifting, as opposed to party down was kind of debauchery and women and drugs and drinking and that kind of thing. So yeah, he turns it on his head. It's
Yeah.
Prince.
An
He's gonna
uplifting party. I like that.
yeah. That's right.
Well,
That's right.
speaking of storming off the stage and dropping your microphone, Laura, I think I'll probably let you go at this time. If you have any final words or anything else you wanted to say about Party Up.
You know what? I just say people, everyone should grab a copy of Dirty Mind, and it's really a seminal album in its history, and the start of a great creative run. So excited to hear where you going next, Jason. Can't wait for
All
Controversy.
right. Yeah, Controversy is a great album too. I'm looking forward to it. I really enjoyed recording all these episodes for Dirty Mind because it is one of my favorite Prince albums.
Yes,
All right.
yes,
Well, thanks again, Laura.
absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, you're welcome anytime. You're always welcome. You've been listening to the Press Rewind Prince Lyrics podcast. I've been your host, Jason Brenninger. Once again, another thank you to Laura Tiebert for joining me on this episode. A lot of great insight, as I would have expected from somebody who has researched Prince, especially in his early career, as much as she has for the creation of The Rise of Prince, 1958 to 1988, the book she co-authored with Alex Hahn. Please check that book out. It's quite the read and provides a lot of insight, and I recommend it to just anybody who is a Prince friend, or fan. So thanks, Laura, again, and until next time, goodbye.